Well, Lauren, I am so glad to have you on the podcast today. I know my listeners are going to enjoy hearing more about your business and your story.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great, great. Well, one of the things, Lauren, that I have learned from you is that you talk about being ready enough to make a move in life and business and work. So, can you first start by telling us the story of what prompted you to start talking about and teaching really about the concept of being ready enough to take a risk?
Yeah, well, this whole idea of readiness came through life experience. So I was always one of those kids that was so bold. I would go after any dream, did not think of failure as an option. I would just go after it. So I would
Mhm.
start a photography business because I wanted to. Would advertise my babysitting services in the neighborhood. And I noticed that when I started college and getting older and then starting my corporate job, I wasn't quite as bold as I used to be when I was that little girl. And
Mhm.
I was holding myself back a lot. So I became the person that would think through every single scenario before I would take action on that goal. I would wait until I checked every single box before I would apply to that job. I would wait until I had my whole script in my head before unmuting myself and speaking on a meeting. And so it was a lot of these little micro decisions that led to me being much more of a wallflower than being bold and going after things. And so it was really impacting my career because I would be the one that would hesitate. And then that quick opportunity that comes would pass me by, and that hesitation was costing me.
Mm.
So it was during this moment of 2020 and all the craziness of the world and just in a huge amount of stress that I was experiencing was a time where I really got to pause and reflect. And it was in that moment that I realized that I was costing my own career. I was holding
Mm.
myself back to the point where other people were going after their goals and I was falling behind. So it was in that moment where I was like, I've had it. I need to do something different. So, how can I start going after goals when I don't have all the answers? Because the
Mhm.
reality is, I won't have all the answers ever.
Right, right.
So, how can I start taking those tiny actions even without all of the answers or knowing how the scenario is going to play out? I was very early in my career. So, I started full time in marketing. So, it was very much hustle culture. I working in tech, I a lot of times was the youngest and or the only woman in the room.
Mm.
So it was a lot of those pressures too of thinking like, okay, I don't have any experience. Who am I to speak up? Or
Yeah.
look at all of these senior leaders and I am just a early in career. Like what do I know?
Mhm.
So it was, yeah, navigating all of those pressures, the busyness of corporate, just the, daily
Yeah.
hustle. And then I became a mom in 2022. So that also was just I needed to start living differently because it was just so many dreams and decisions that I had made that were getting pushed
Mhm.
back because of my fear of failure, because I was worried about that public display of failure, worrying about
Yeah.
what people would think about me.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it was really holding me back.
So when did was there one moment where you were like, "Okay, this is enough?"
Yeah. So, there, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, and there's this beautiful art museum that's half indoors, half outdoors. But the outdoor space is beautiful, sprawling, lots of like sculptures, paths, ponds. So it was one of those days. It was like early April 2020. Um, was on a walk, had my headphones in, but there was no music playing. It was just one of those days where my mind was constantly racing.
Yeah.
And so I sat down by this, like, gorgeous pond, and it was in that moment where it was, like, the first time that I felt like my mind got quiet,
Mm.
and I in that moment, I had 2 questions that kept popping in my mind. It was, "Why and for what? Why
Mm.
am I working so hard to impress these people?
Yeah.
Why am I more worried about their opinions than my own goals? And if this is the decision I'm making and this is the way I'm living my life, then what's even the point? Like, if I'm trying to impress all of these people on social media or at work or family, what's even the point of that? Like, where do my dreams get a vote in this matter? And so it was in that moment where I pretty much said, I've had it. Like, I'm so tired of living this way. And one of the dreams that I had was going after public speaking. It was something I never thought I would pursue. I thought you had to
Mhm.
be like a big name celebrity to be a
Yeah.
keynote speaker. But after I left that museum that day, I went home and posted on Instagram saying, I am a keynote speaker, not I think I want to be a keynote speaker or I'll do this one day. Like I said, I am a keynote speaker.
Oh my gosh. I got chills because I love that. I love that. You're just like, "I'm putting a stake in the ground."
Yes, it was the first time in my life that I had said I am something before I had all of that evidence to back it up.
Oh
And
my
I
gosh.
think it was just such a powerful mindset shift of
Mhm.
putting myself out there before I
Yeah.
even knew what was gonna happen and be like, "You know what? I don't care." Like, I don't care what
Yeah.
those anonymous people on Instagram think, like, this is something I'm doing.
Mhm.
And it was literally in that moment that my life was completely different. My mindset was completely different.
That is so amazing. I love hearing that because I can just imagine how many people are listening to this and they're thinking, but wait, I don't have to be totally ready before I do something. And as a human resources leader and a career consultant in my past, this data is there. Men are more confident in applying to a job before if they don't have all of the qualifications, but women are 70% say that they won't even apply to the job if they don't meet every single criteria. And that's crazy. Like, that's crazy. Here's the thing, the rule for that is like apply when you meet the majority of them, right? You don't have to have all of them, right? But, I think that's so important.
So, the whole idea with readiness is we want to focus on our talents and experiences that we have, not
Hmm.
thinking that we have to check every single box, but go look at your evidence bank. What are those experiences that you have in certain areas, and how can you pull that over into a job application? Or if you're going after a big
Hmm.
goal, think about those tiny experiences that you have that you can put together to create the life or the job that you want to have.
Yeah, I love that. And, I talk about that being transferable skills. Like, we don't have every single skill that we need, but we've done other things in our life that can work. And so oftentimes that comes to me with a teacher who's like, I want to leave teaching. I mean, I've only been a teacher for all these years. I don't know how I would become a marketer. I don't know how I would become a social media person. And I was like, okay, let's talk about all the things that you did as a teacher, how that is transferable to something else. I think it's when we get into this black and white thinking that we forget that even if we don't have like the perfect skill with a bow on it that says, yep, I 100% know how to do this, we can still pull other experiences. And so it sounds like that's what you're talking about. Really, it's just, realizing that you are a whole person and it doesn't have to be black and white.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about finding that middle area of knowing, like, okay, do I have enough of the answers to let me
Mhm.
succeed with that first step? If yes,
Yeah.
then continue forward. You don't have to know
Mhm.
all the way to the finish line. Just know enough to get you to that next step, and then you can figure
Yeah.
out the next step from there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I'm going to share another example. I had someone reach out to me recently. She's the daughter of a good friend of mine and, has historically done fantastic in school, right? So, I mean, she's just a model student in both undergrad and she actually went to NC State and graduated summa cum laude and so great. And she reached out to me and said, Mindy, I'm thinking of joining this program that teaches and certifies people to be in pharmaceutical sales. And, I'm nervous. And I said, you have 100% track record of being a great student. So I'm not questioning that you can learn anything else because you're already proven that you are great at learning new things. And it was like the one thing she had to hear in order to be like, I am a good student. I do
Hmm.
always do well when I learn something. I can learn it and apply it. And so I think that just popped in my head as, no, she knows nothing about pharmaceutical sales yet, but she's already has the skill of being a great learner. And that helps with anything that we want to do next in life.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about taking just that next small step. And a lot of times
Mhm.
we think like, okay, this dream is so big. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. You don't have to
Yeah.
know how to get there. You just have to know
Yeah.
how to take that next step. And then just
Yeah.
one small step after another will eventually lead you to where you're meant to be.
Mhm. I love that. So you also talk about risk and the ability to assess and take risk as actually being a leadership skill. Walk me through that.
Yeah. So I think risk is one of those things that is not taught in schools. Like, we're
Mm.
taught to play it safe, play it within a rubric. Risk a lot of times is one of those things where you wanna stay within the lines. Like, we're taught you color
Mhm.
inside the lines, you answer these questions to get 100 on the test. And so the idea of risk is like when we enter the corporate world, if we're working for ourselves, is we don't wanna take risks because we're taught that success means staying within these limits. And
Mhm.
in reality, risks is where the innovation happens. Risk is where
Yeah.
you realize what you're good at. Like, I never thought I wanted to be a public speaker, but it was me taking tiny risks of getting on a stage and grabbing a microphone and thinking like, "Okay, I kinda like this," and
Yeah.
taking small risks. So it's all about taking small, repeatable steps of
Mhm.
safe, calculated risks. It's not
Mhm.
taking huge, big risks. Like, don't quit your job today and then go start something brand new without any preparation ahead of time. But
Yeah.
what's that daily 1% risk that you can take?
Mhm.
One small, uncomfortable action, something that feels a little bit outside of your comfort zone, because that's where like the magic is going to happen. That's where you're going to
Yeah.
see innovation in companies and on teams. And especially as leaders, like we want to create an environment where we're demonstrating that. We're allowing our teams to innovate and take risks and having the leadership skill to back them up and support them taking those risks. Like, we don't
Mhm.
want to create this culture where any risk is seen as not good. Like, we want them to
Yeah.
take those tiny risks. So I think risk is a huge thing that isn't talked about much, but we need to be pushing the envelope more. We need to be trying
Yeah.
harder to go outside our comfort zones and let's make ourselves a little bit uncomfortable.
Mhm. I love that I love it. I think that's really true. Like, we actually weren't really raised to reward risk, right? We were raised to, like, do the right thing, study hard, and that will get you the results. Love how you talked about risk being tied to innovation and creativity. So, a lot of your message is personal, right? Like, taking a personal risk, but how does that show up once we're in the job? How do we continue as leaders to demonstrate risk in the workplace?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a couple things that we can do. First of all, as leaders, it's important for us to set the tone as far as like what's safe. If we
Mhm.
reward perfection, then you'll see hesitation increasing on your teams. Teams
Okay.
are not going to send you that presentation or that proposal until it is completely buttoned up and polished.
Mhm.
If we are rewarding progress, making progress towards our goals,
Mhm.
that's where we're gonna see the action increase. That's where we're gonna
Yeah.
see teams taking those tiny steps, innovating throughout the process, understanding like, okay, it doesn't have to be completely perfect, but what are those small safe things that we can try out to
Mhm.
see like tiny little levers that we can turn. So
Mhm.
if you're an email marketer, test 2 different subject lines. See
Yeah.
which one works. If you're a teacher, try a new method for teaching math that day that you don't
Mhm.
normally do. So it's shaking things up in just tiny micro ways to see,
Mhm.
okay, how does my audience or my team respond to this risk and innovation? Does it increase numbers? Does it increase satisfaction?
Mhm.
Are there some downsides to it? Because that's also learning. Like,
Yeah.
when we talk about risk, we want the positive, but we
Yeah.
could also see negative repercussions, but that's why we want to do it within safe limits. It's if we have a negative outcome, then we can innovate and think, okay, what can we do differently next time to improve it? For example, I just launched a public speaking course and hit my goals, but there were tons of risks involved with it.
Yeah.
We were talking before we started recording about just doing like that hindsight action of thinking what worked really well and what didn't work well. What are
Mhm.
some areas where I can try something new next time?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a huge risk. I'm not going to drop 100 grand on Facebook ads on my
Yeah.
next launch. But
Yeah.
what are those tiny things that I can shift and try out and be like, huh, okay, let's see how the audience responds to this ad copy. Or maybe I offer one more webinar than another. The
Mhm.
risk is I may lose an hour of my time,
Yeah.
but I could make a lot more sales. So thinking about just what are those tiny things that you can change throughout the process to get
Mhm.
you better results than maybe you've even dreamed of.
Yeah, I will tell you That sparked a few things. So first, we were talking ahead of time and, we both launched a program and, for the first time in my business, what I used to do when I launched something was I would launch it once and be like, okay, it was either worked or it didn't. Oh, I guess that wasn't that great and move on to something else. I did that probably 4 times in the 5 years I've had my business. This time I tried something different and I basically said, it's not a one time launch, like every single week for 6 weeks, I'm going to do this. And I cannot even tell you how much I learned from that and how much it iterated over time, and every single week was different and honestly better than the week before. And so just learning through saying, I'm gonna do something different. The other thing I want to say is I love how you talked about the boss or the leader of the team encouraging risk and innovation and creativity, because if it's not, like, approved or encouraged by the leader, we can squash the growth of our people and even our teams and our environment when we don't encourage risk. So, what advice do you have for leaders on being open and encouraging to helping their employees see that they can be creative and take risks?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think it's so important to openly talk about those
Mhm.
fails and celebrate them on team calls. Talk
Yeah.
about what you did in the past week, what worked really well, but what didn't work so well.
Mhm.
Just having an open, supportive dialogue about it of saying, like, we don't want to wag the finger and be like, oh, you messed up here. Like, how can we talk about what we learned from that situation? How can we improve it? Because not only by you sharing are you helping your own innovation, but you're helping the rest of your team's innovation as well because they're
Yeah.
learning from the things that didn't work out so well. So I think having an
Mhm.
open dialogue where we celebrate those failures as much as we celebrate those wins
Yeah.
creates an environment where we're more willing to take risks because we know it's a safe ground. The thing that employees seek is safety. They want to know
Mhm.
that, am I safe to innovate? Am I safe to
Mhm.
go outside the comfort zone a little bit? So, open communication is the first thing. The second thing is you need to demonstrate it yourself. If you're
Mm.
somebody that plays it safe, then your teams are going to see that and they're going to play it safe as well. So,
Mhm.
you need to demonstrate how you're taking risks, doing things a little bit outside of your comfort zone, creating that culture where it's we want to take risks because if you're not, you're becoming stale. And as you
Yeah.
pointed on, Mindy, it leads to burnout. We don't want
Yeah.
burned out teams. We want people to feel like they're
Mhm.
contributing and that they're able to use some creativity and use some of their own talents. And that comes from the innovation and the risk taking.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I spent 25 years in corporate and in HR. And so when I think back, the best bosses that I had were the bosses who were really encouraging for me to just try something. Like, what do you think you should do? And try it instead of saying, nope, this is exactly how you should do it. I actually don't thrive in those environments. I don't thrive in an environment that's structured. I really need that ability to use my brain and to try things. I think it's just kind of how I'm wired. But I can think of a specific boss that I had, and when she would really say that it was worth a try. Great, even if it didn't work. And when did work, she would really celebrate it with me and help me to see that ounce of creativity, really, really did help.
Yeah, for sure. It's so important to model it as a leader because we want employees to thrive. We want them to enjoy where they're working. We want them to innovate and grow their own careers. And the way you do
Mhm.
that is by taking risks. So we don't
Yeah.
want to squash that and create this dialogue where they think, okay, I'm only rewarded if it's completely perfect. Like we want to reward that progress over the
Yeah.
perfection.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, for someone listening who knows they're probably holding themselves back, they might be listening to this and thinking that they resonate with the description of you that you were talking about, where you realized one day, like, I've got to take more risk. I can't just keep playing it safe. What's a question or more a few questions that they could ask themselves to help them to start interrupting this pattern that they've gotten into?
Yeah. So there's an exercise that I do with a lot of my clients to help them build what I call is your ready enough statement. And
Mhm.
the way it goes is first you think about what are those things I enjoyed doing as a kid? What are
Mm,
those passions, hobbies, things that you enjoy? Like, for example, I loved dancing as a kid. I loved
mm,
being on a stage. I do that a little bit differently now via keynotes. I am no longer dancing on
yeah,
a stage.
yeah.
But what are those things that just like really lit you up? How did you spend a lot of your spare time as a kid?
Mhm.
The second thing is, how do you use that passion today? Are
Okay.
you using that passion at work? Like if you enjoyed being with kids, are you spending time with kids? Or if you like talking, are you in a career that allows lots of talking?
Mm,
And then next is if you could do anything, what would it be? And this
mhm,
is where we have to be really careful to not let those societal pressures, those fears hold us back. Like, this is just between you and your pen and paper. Like, write down what are those things that you would love to do if you
mhm.
could. Then the next question is what's holding you back? So,
Okay.
this could be very practical. It could be finances, it could be time,
Mhm,
it could be maybe you don't have the right skills to get to that
mhm,
dream goal. But what are those things that are holding you back? And then finally, what's one small action that you can take to get you closer to those goals? And the idea with this is it needs to be an action that is so small and so doable that you can complete it in the next week. So
okay.
if you dream of starting a business, then maybe your action is you're going to purchase a domain for that business, or you'll Google how to start a business.
Yeah.
But it needs to be something so small that it will get done in the next week. And then what we do is we put this together into our ready enough statement. And so it basically goes, I believe I'm ready enough to blank. And the first action I'm taking on this goal is blank. And what I always have
Mm,
my clients do is you sign it and date it so that you are
I
not
love that.
only writing it down, which is powerful. It tells your brain to pay attention to it. You're signing it. So there's some accountability and you're dating it. You're giving yourself a deadline because if we don't give ourselves a deadline, like I will forget about it the second I leave
Yeah,
the room. So
yeah.
giving yourself a hard deadline to know, okay, here's one small action. And the idea is, okay, you do that one small action, great. Then think of your next small action that you can do.
Mhm.
And it's just lots of tiny micro movements that get yourself closer to that goal.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love the idea of a ready enough statement, like, I'm putting a stake in the ground. I believe that I am ready enough to begin this
Hmm.
because, as you know, like, you and I are both speakers, and it doesn't happen overnight,
No.
right? It does not happen overnight. It's the long game. I was just actually explaining that to somebody yesterday. Like, you don't speak and it's like, "Okay, I'm all of a sudden famous," That's not how it works. Not that even fame is the goal, right? But to build a business around speaking for me is the goal. But, it doesn't happen overnight. So the idea of, nobody really got there overnight. I don't even believe in an overnight success. I think that it just means that people started seeing them visibly, but they've been working on it for a long time. So I love the idea of saying, small steps are going to get me there. And you're totally right. Time and money are things that can keep us from doing things, but they don't keep us from starting. They don't keep
Exactly.
us from making steps in that right direction. So do you coach people and consult people in groups or one on one? How does that work?
Yeah, so I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. The way it works is I meet with clients, figure out what their goals are. Sometimes it's very tangible, like I'm working with a client right now that her dream is to get on the red dot and give a TED talk. So I'm coaching her through that. Other times it's, they want to start a business, they want to grow their career and be a manager. So it's thinking
Yeah.
about like, what is that dream goal that you have? And then we start with our mindset because a lot of times that is the biggest hurdle to overcome is our
Mhm.
mindset, and then we can get to the easier nitty-gritty details of how are we actually going to implement this to get you to closer to your goals. But first, we got to believe that we can do it. Because if we don't
Yeah.
believe we can do it, it's not happening.
Yeah.
So we got to start there of overcoming that mindset and then coming up with that action plan to get you closer to that goal.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. That's great. I don't know that I knew that you did the individual coaching, and that's so important for people to hear because, oftentimes we just need a guide, right? We just need someone who said, I know how I got there and I can help you. I think that's so wise. So how do you balance being thoughtful and prepared without slipping into perfectionism or even just hesitation?
It's hard. It is so hard. And this is something that, I mean, I speak on this subject. I still struggle with this because I
Mhm.
am constantly a recovering perfectionist. I really have to challenge myself to get it to a point where I'm proud of the work that I'm putting
Mhm.
out there, but showing some of those flaws because I
Mhm.
can't tell you how many times someone's come up to me after a gig and it's what they relate to is my messy stories. They don't want the polished version. People are tired of the polished version because it doesn't feel achievable. It doesn't seem realistic. And so sharing some of those messy sides helps me keep myself accountable, but also shows others like, here's all the missteps that I had, but here's how I'm getting here. Another thing I have to do is just thinking about like, who am I trying to please? Because a
Mhm.
lot of times, if I'm trying to get to that perfection version, it's because I'm
Mhm.
trying to impress somebody.
Yeah.
Could be a specific person like, "Oh, I wanna show my boss that I am
Yeah.
capable." Other
Yeah.
times a lot of times it's nameless though. It's just
Yeah.
like my followers or people on social media, I gotta impress them. And if you were to be like, "Lauren, who are you trying to impress?" I don't know. I don't know.
Mhm.
Just
Mhm.
somebody out there. Thinking about like, is it somebody external or am I wanting to make myself proud? If it's the latter, then like usually it will be a less than finished product, but a still really good product
Mhm.
if I'm at peace with it and I'm not trying to impress all of these other peoples. A lot of times when we're striving towards that perfection, it's because of those external factors. And so
Yeah.
I really have to focus on like, what do I want? What do I want to put out there that I'm going to be proud of to have my signature on?
Yeah, I love that. I am not an expert in the Enneagram, but I do know I'm an Enneagram 3, which is an are you too?
Oh,
Okay,
yeah. Can
yes.
you tell?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I can tell actually. It's funny that you said that because I was like, I have a feeling she might be a 3 too. And
Yep.
like I said,
Yep.
I know like I don't know, a very small percent of the information out there about Enneagrams. But every time I read something that says, if you're a 3, you might be, and I was like, yeah, that's totally me. And as you were talking about that, I was even thinking like, well, who am I trying to impress? And so many times I can't name anybody either. It's just the way my brain works, right? Just the way my brain works. And I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach, so I know a lot about the Gallup. And I was thinking when you were originally talking, so it can be a strength. Gallup calls it being deliberative to really think through your decisions. And a blind spot for that one is that you keep thinking and thinking and thinking and never take a step, right? And then the somewhat opposite of that, I don't want to say complete opposite, but the other version of that is what's called an activator. And it's somebody who literally is like, I have enough action to take, or I have enough information to take action, and it's all going to work itself out over time, but I'm going to act before I've thought things through, right?
Hmm.
Really, really well. And so I'm an activator and my husband is deliberative. And so it's so interesting to be in such a close relationship with someone who's so good at thinking through decisions when I'm like, let's just go. Like, let's just go. So that comes out in a lot of ways. But I'll tell you, we were like, we're going to take the kids on a cruise this summer. So I'm literally on the internet 20 minutes later booking it, and he's like, "What is the rush? What are you doing?" Like, and I'm like, "That's just how my brain works." So I do imagine that some of this is how we're wired, but
Hmm.
then, we can all have blind spots. Those things are
Yeah.
strengths, and then there are also blind spots of saying, "Okay, I'm being too deliberative about this. I'm waiting for perfection, and that's just not the goal." Right?
No matter which side you are, I think it's so important to give yourself a deadline. So that's
Yeah.
either going to force you to hit the gas or hit the brakes, depending on what type you are. So if you're the
Yeah.
type of person that wants to deliberate forever, you got to
Mhm.
take action at some point. So you give
Yes.
yourself that deadline, a reasonable deadline,
A reasonable
and
deadline,
you
yeah.
have to take action by that date. If you're the person that wants to jump in, force yourself to hit the brakes a little bit, spend a little bit more time researching but then
Mhm.
okay, you're off to the races by that date.
Yeah.
So I think either way, it's so important to give yourself an end date because otherwise we can either be stuck in deliberation mode or taking action. And then we're going off in a completely different tangent than what we
Yes.
originally set ourselves on.
Yeah, I will tell you, I would say my biggest growth opportunity as a business owner, and probably was in my business experience too, corporate experience. My biggest one, and I journal about this, I've talked to business coaches about this, is pausing long enough. I mean, it's just pausing long enough, like that I can make sure that I have not overcommitted, right?
Mhm.
Schedule or, if you say yes too often, in my situation, then I find myself burnout, overcommitted, spread you thin, really. And so you're totally right. There's a balance between the two, and really just figuring out there's a benefit to both and a blind spot to both. And when do I need to hit the brakes? So, but I will tell you, like, as you're talking about being ready enough, just because I'm an activator does not mean that I always trust myself enough to act on big things,
Yeah.
or I'll
Yeah.
act on too many things in just a little bit of effort in so many ways. It was a big deal for me to make the call to be a speaker too. I really
Yeah.
just thought I've trained forever, and so I was like, "Oh, I'm a trainer for a company." I never even thought about being a keynote speaker. I really never even thought about it. And honestly, what made me think about it was someone asking me to do it and then saying, "What's your rate?" And I was like, "My rate?" I went to Google, I'm like, "What is my rate? I have no idea. What is my rate?" And I charged them and loved it and got off the stage and was like, "Okay, I never thought about this was a job, and now I really wanna do this." And you know what happens when you start telling people what you wanna do? You start getting ads on Instagram because they hear
Yep.
you all the time, right? And
Oh,
Jess
yeah.
Ekstrom's ads came up, and I joined their program I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, there's a program who can teach me this." Anyway, I think it's important to have both, like you said, the brakes and just to know when to put the gas on and move forward with something, even if it's not fully baked and maybe you're not even 100% sure that it's going to work, but just knowing that you can take a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and listen, like, even if it doesn't work out, you were so much further along than all
Mhm.
of those other people that dreamt it up but didn't take action.
Yeah.
Because, like, you were
Yeah.
bold enough to take that first step. So,
Yeah.
that alone is worth celebration, that you're the one
Mhm.
deciding, like, "I'm gonna get on the stage. I'm not gonna sit backstage anymore. I'm gonna
Mhm.
start doing it and see what
Yeah.
happens." Like, that is so much more beautiful than just constantly sitting on the sidelines watching other people do it.
Yeah, for sure. So what's the cost of waiting? So when we think about that, what's the cost of waiting until you're fully ready, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different things. Cost of waiting, sometimes opportunities, it is a 1-second decision. It could
Mhm.
be the difference between you getting picked for a job and not because you hesitated to click apply.
Mm.
It could be on a personal level, like, you see a cute guy in the grocery store, you think about asking his phone number, and you don't, and then he leaves the grocery store. That could have been
Mhm.
a match made in heaven, and you would never know. It could be, thinking about, like, "Okay, I wanna start a business, but now isn't the right season." And so
Mhm.
you wait until you have the confidence and you start at 5 years from now, and it's a huge success. Imagine if you had started it 5 years earlier, how much more you would be making, how much further along you would be. So there's a lot of costs to waiting. I think there's a healthy dose of waiting, but a lot of times we use that as an excuse and we tell
Mhm.
ourselves that we're being cautious, that we're waiting for the right opportunity, for the right time.
Mhm.
It sometimes ends up in this like dangerous cycle where we almost become like addicted to that certainty
Mm.
where we want to be certain before we take that next step. And the thing about certainty is the more that you give certainty the time of day, the more it demands. And
Yeah.
it's going to constantly ask for more and more and more. And there's
Mm.
going to be opportunities, jobs, relationships, friendships,
Yeah.
decision to have kids or not. Like so many things that are going to pass you by if you constantly stay in this preparation.
So Lauren, as we wrap up our episode, I would love for you to tell people how they can work with you or where they can find information about your speaking as well as your coaching.
Sure. So for speaking, coaching, you just want to see what I'm up to with my podcast, course, all of that, you can go to laurenbeane.com and you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm super active on there. Or you can follow me on Instagram at lauren.beane.
Okay, great. Great. I will make sure to put all of that in the show notes. I just want to thank you for coming on today. I just hope that this message, somebody's listening and they're like, you know what? I am ready enough to make the next step because I think your topic is just so important for men and women to hear that somebody else has had that awakening of, saying, I have enough information to make the next step and the next decision. So I appreciate you telling your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Great. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you leave a review and hit the follow button and also share it with a friend. Until next time, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode of the People Success Circle.